Okay, welcome back. This is Jason, co-founder of Radiant Family, and we're carrying on with our discussion regarding the law of attraction. We've been over a lot of key points, including the step-by-step process of the law of attraction and how it actually plays out in a practical way, and what that means to us on any given day. And now we're going to be shifting gears a little bit now that we've kind of gone through some of the more comprehensive, practical applications and understandings of the law of attraction. We'll be moving a little bit more into the quantum realms, or the understandings that go into a much more theoretical viewpoint. And when I say theoretical, it means that it is one particular way of seeing it that, when put to the test, delivers a particular result because you've actually investigated it for yourself. So it's a theory, which then is incumbent upon the person listening to actually go and find out for themselves if it actually adds up. So when we look at creation really relies upon a fixed paradigm, meaning a particular continuum that seems to be isolated apart from the whole. So the more fixed the paradigm is, the easier it seems to be to create, and also simultaneously the more difficult it is to create, because in a fixed paradigm there is a scarcity mentality, and there tends to be the will to dominate. So there's a lot more pressure pushing back, tidal forces pushing against one another, and we're just trying to find where we fall in all of these fixed tidal forces of control. And what's happening in relationship to the path of our solar system, the path of our planet, and this has been documented, our whole solar system basically has come into an entirely different span of the galaxy. It's an entirely different era we've moved into. And with this development, we've moved into what we call the photon belt. It's a belt, or a more of a non-linear expression of light and information that has been flooding the planet, especially since 2012. But now we're coming up on more of an apex of that photonic information and energy, and we'll make a little bit of a leap, where fixed paradigms are starting to become less and less fixed. So what we thought was a sure deal, or what we thought was something that would definitely play out in a certain way, we're finding it's less linear, and it's less congruent in the way we're seeing it. It doesn't seem as solid. Some people might be even feeling the sense of a dreamlike existence, where everything is starting to look less and less tangibly real. Now, the reason why I'm bringing this up is that it directly affects the way that the quantum law of attraction is in relationship to the mind. Because we have what we call any given timeline is one perception, a way of seeing things. So a timeline really has to do with perception. So how you see things playing out around you, what you are focusing on, and therefore the way that your vital force generates is adding to that timeline. But what's happening, for various reasons, there's many different reasons, but especially because we've come into a totally different era, and that the energy of that Piscean era, or the Kali Yuga, is starting to come to a close, and that the apex of those energies, it's a convergent point, to where we're starting to feel a lot of uncertainty because we're no longer really feeling a fixed timeline or a fixed paradigm. We can say that this is it. Here's the future. Here's what will happen. So with any fixed timeline, it requires a tremendous amount of energy to keep it that way. That's why we see that there's so much amassing everywhere, so many people trying to amass everything that they can to somehow force the paradigm that they remember, the old Piscean or Kali Yuga paradigm, to continue. But the opportunity here is that as the dimensional veils, the veils between these parallel dimensions or parallel paradigms or timelines starts to thin, there's a wobble effect. So if you think about a timeline is one linear way of seeing things, and now think of those timelines now sort of wobbling into one another. So this is still really basic stuff that I'm speaking about. I'm putting it in really just basic layman's terms. Basically that the expressions of one potential are starting to bleed into another potential. Now imagine that's typically what happens when we have a conflict. When you might walk into a room and everything is fine, and then say several people enter the room, and before you know it, for no apparent reason, there's just chaos. Okay, that's when convergent timelines or convergent paradigms have met face to face, and they're all seeing from a completely different paradigm. And then the wobbling of those different timelines actually merge into each other. But the more fixed each one of those timelines are, meaning the thicker the veil is, the more chance of explosive conflict there is. What's happening now is that there is a thinning of the thickness, the density of mind between different realities. And this might be, for some people, this might be too much. If you're still listening, it might not be too much for you. So feel free to continue down this rabbit hole if you'd like. If not, you can always click right off the video. So basically, as this wobble effect occurs, you can see that there's an ambiguous feeling of uncertainty. So if you're feeling some sense of uncertainty, usually that means that there's been a wobble of another parallel dimension has simply come into the current point of view you're holding. This isn't something to be frightened of. This is actually an opportunity, because the amount of orgone energy, as I spoke of in some of the earlier descriptions of the law of attraction, has quantified itself exponentially on the planet. The only problem now is the ability to fix attention is becoming more and more confused, because as there's a wobble of one timeline bleeding into another because of that veil thinning between the dimensional paradigms, because we've moved into a totally different section of the galaxy, all of that focus that used to be so hardwired into like a mainframe paradigm, that is all collapsed, and it's much more difficult to keep that focus as one particular point of view to continue to generate enough energy to create what it is that we want to create. So what to do around the paradigm of this somewhat ambiguous loss of generalized focus? Well, there's one focus that isn't really spoken of typically in the law of attraction, and that is pure consciousness. So what we have the capacity to do as human beings is to focus back to the sense of the suchness of being. We can call it the sense of I am. And from that place, it's a paradigm that can move throughout all of the different dimensional possibilities, because it already is. It already is like a field throughout all potentials. We could also call this veil the quantum field. So what we're coming in tune with now is that quantum matrix, the quantum field that used to be very much only accessed by certain control groups and certain people who learned how to access that field and use it for their own benefit. But now, because mind, the sense of individual mind is starting to thin and collapse in a way, the sense of just generating and just creating for myself and my own self-interest is becoming less and less viable, as we can see, because it's met with more resistance now. So now the ability to generate, not just for ourselves, but for the whole, using the law of attraction now to create a better paradigm where there's more solidity and more of a continuum of like minds which can actually grasp what I'm saying here. We are coming from a place that is the background of existence. And you're still seeing the foreground, but as that wobble of dimensional crisscrossing continues to accentuate, which it will, and the bleeding in of all these different dimensional possibilities accentuates, we'll tend to see one of two things: a greater spiritual development, which will be rich with many avenues of expression that we haven't even delved into, many manifestive qualities that haven't even been touched on yet. This is all here. It's right at our fingertips right now. Or if we choose to try to stay to more of a personal fixed position and not coming into that field of being or the suchness behind existence, what we will see is a continuum that looks more and more chaotic all the time, more and more uncertain and confused all the time. So what I'm pointing at is a way out, a way of using the law of attraction to not just focus on an isolated thing here and there, but to start to allow that dimensional wobble to be your greatest asset, your greatest ally. And this is something that you're going to get in very few discourses about the law of attraction. Very few people are going to speak about this, because this information is fundamentally kept secret, because it can be used to really focus in on the potentials that are all merging together and to co-create with life in a way that you never thought was possible. So if you're feeling a sense of confusion about what I'm saying, that's fine, because sometimes it takes time to grasp where someone's going with something. And then again, start to analyze for yourself. Just check. Some people might still feel that there's just one fixed paradigm. Other people might really start to feel what I'm speaking about, where it's not just a fixed paradigm any longer. And this has been some time in the coming, but now it's really starting to pick up a certain degree of empowerment and a velocity, where we're really coming to the point where it's a point of no return, meaning coming into a paradigm where all these potentials, all these realities are now bleeding into each other, so that dimensional wobble where every so often we'll see two parallel possibilities coming together and clashing, that's going to start diminishing. Now it's going to be more either looking more chaotic, or it's going to look more symbiotic, where everything can start coming together. What it requires is the qualification of what I'm speaking about, which is that background of existence. Now, how do we access that? For those who are still listening, who are still interested in what I'm speaking about, this great potential. How do we access that? And the fact is that it's always been the very foundation of your existence. Any paradigm, anything that you've created or co-created with life, it's always been because of that backdrop or the background of reality, which springs forth the sense of I am or I exist. Now we're being asked to go deeper into that. The sense of existence, and what unveils itself is the sense of that one quantum fixed position of existence, which isn't concerned about moving from one timeline to another, from one parallel dimension to another. And when I'm speaking about this, by the way, I'm not speaking about, some silly thing where we're jumping through a portal, because people's minds can really take this into fantasy. I'm talking about everything basically looking the same. But when you start to feel the sense of uncertainty for no apparent reason, you might feel a certain degree of depression or anxiety. It's typically when one or more, at this point many, a nexus point of many different continuums are merging. And those continuums, as they merge, they start to create a confusion in the linear mind. The sense of, I'm not sure where I belong. And many of you know I'm a Reiki Master teacher. And with many of my students, that's one thing that I've been fielding recently, is a lot of students bringing up the fact that they feel that there's no place they belong, or they don't feel that they really know what the direction is any longer. Which direction is mine? What do I even mean anymore? Okay, so this is becoming more and more prevalent in the world. So if you're feeling this, that means that you're actually coming into that nexus, that nexus of intertwined, merging, convergent timelines. And the veil of mind being that which gives the linear delineation between potentials, is starting to thin more and more. So the sense of what I thought I was may start to feel diminished. And that's typically where people will go into the sense of brooding or depression or anxiety, because what I classified as myself has now been challenged, perhaps. And now it's being done on a level that doesn't even really have a fixed position to it. It might be that we're just going along with our day and we start to feel moody, and we start to feel confused or depressed or anxious, or the sense of hopelessness. All these feelings aren't to be feared, or don't be concerned about these feelings. Do what you need to do. Journal, speak to friends, etc. Connect and hold close to those that are dear. But don't be so concerned about them, because I'm actually giving you the why behind these unexplained feelings. Because we are quantum in our foundation. The very essence of our body is constantly in flux. Our DNA, the atomic structure within the DNA, all of it is being affected by that photon belt that we're coming through. The sun itself has changed from less of a third density, more into a fourth density star, which means that the very quantum continuum that's being emitted from our sun has changed almost entirely. So I won't get into a lot of that. That's just basically another example as to why suddenly everything feels so different. If you'll notice also, technology is on the rise, and there are two kinds of technology. One is going to try to centralize mind, to quantify everybody back into sort of a linear nature. And we can see all the technologies that are doing that, where people are less connected and more connected through technology. In fact, this is a bit of a joke, but it's a silly kind of thing that I saw, but it's part of this paradigm about technology and the importance of the Orgone Generators in all of this. And I'll come full circle and describe it. But basically, the other day, I was speaking to somebody, and I was suggesting that I lend one of my Orgone Generators to her so she could use it in her business. She's having some challenges. And I spoke about the powerful manifestive quality of the Orgone Generator and how it can actually really focus all these potentials and really harmonize them so we can really come to the highest potential collectively. And then, so I kid you not, she is on her phone texting somebody, and she said, "You know what? I don't need technology to manifest anything. I can do it myself." As she was texting someone. Okay, so that's a good example of how the mind is no longer seeing technology as technology, and that should be a warning sign to us also. Now that's a centralized technology that, yes, continue using your cell phones, continue texting, that's fine. We're using the internet to get this out. This technology isn't necessarily bad. But the Orgone Generators are non-centralized technology. So the ability to really start to create a continuum through the law of attraction, which is the profound and beautiful essence of your own life's purpose. Because even though we're losing the linear nature of life, as we start to go deeper into the root of our own consciousness, we start to see more and more and more that within that non-linear nature of consciousness, we're starting to actually come into the potential of realizing our own divine purpose much, much, much greater at this point. So if this all feels confusing, remember that it is an integration of understanding. This is not something where we just give it to you. This is more of a quantum understanding. So some people are really understanding what I'm saying, and some people are already living what I'm speaking about. Other people might feel a bit of a disconnect, and that's fine. Because I don't really have a fixed position on whether people get it or not. This is just one perspective on what's happening, so we can actually see deeper into why sometimes it seems like it's more ambiguous and a little bit more confused when it comes to the nature of manifestation and co-creation with life, and how we can start to tap into pure consciousness, the pure essence of life as the backdrop of reality, to start to create a singularity that is now once again fixed in a different way. It doesn't necessarily have to be fixed in a concrete way anymore, which is actually really good news. Because those things that are fixed in a concrete way, they're going to always be fleeting to us. But to start to use the law of attraction in more of a quantum outlook about life, to start to manifest in multiple dimensions, this is possible. And some people might be saying, well, prove it. But I'd say prove it to yourself. Because I bring it forth as a possibility, not to say, I'm going to try to prove it to you, because I'm giving a backdrop of something so that you yourself can take the information I've given you and find the place in yourself where it might resonate, and then start to prove it to yourself. This is the multidimensionality of what we are as human beings. And this is the great potential that we're coming into. This is not the end, as many people think, that this is such a difficult time where everything is ending. It's just the end of one era. And what we're coming into is the very beginning of something that is inconceivably beautiful. So I'll leave it at that for you to ponder and let that soak in and sink in. And as always, many, many blessings on your path.